Why do I feel like I linger between the words to say the words to remember.
What is up, nerd? It's Chris here. Today we're going to be talking about the absolute chaddest Chad in all of Bleach, Kenpachi Zaraki. Born on November 19th and standing at 6'7.5", weighing 198 pounds, Kenpachi Zaraki is one of the most badass captains and one of the strongest captains in the entire Gotei 13, and probably one of the strongest people in the entirety of the Soul Society. He is in fact a Shinigami, despite the fact that he actually didn't go through the academy. He actually killed Kenpachi and took his title. Because of this, he was able to become the captain of the 11th Division, which the captain of the 11th Division has always been the Kenpachi, the strongest Soul Reaper. That's been the title that's been associated with the 11th captain, since it was first created. The first Kenpachi, Yachiru Unohana, she was the first Kenpachi. So, in essence, she was the one that started the tradition that the Kenpachi would always be the captain of the 11th Division, and the captain of the 11th Division would always be the Kenpachi. So, as per the rules of the Kenpachi, if you kill him, you become him. Zaraki was able to kill the Kenpachi before him and become the captain of the 11th Division, despite not having gone through the academy at all, not having become a Soul Reaper in any official capacity before this. He was given the title. His lieutenant and second-hand woman is Yachiru Kusajishi, a small, adorable, and seemingly mysterious little girl. He operates out of the Seirete, the Soul Society, and he is, in essence, a bit of a, I guess you could call him a blood knight. Yeah, he's always looking for a fight. He's always looking for a challenge. He's not necessarily a bad guy. He's actually a pretty nice guy, all things considered. He does a lot of things for a lot of people he doesn't have to, but he's not afraid to kill someone. He's always looking for a fight, and he's got a bit of an attitude issue. His only real relatives, I suppose you could say, I suppose you could make the argument that Yachiru Kusajishi, his lieutenant, is technically like his adoptive daughter, but other than that, it's unknown whether or not he has any family, I do believe. As far as his Shikai and his Bankai, we'll all get into those in the 1000-Year Blood War version of this video, but for now, just know that he has a Zanpakuto, and despite the speculation of some characters, what you're seeing, the sword that he's using throughout the anime, that is in fact not a Shikai, that is just the normal sword. We had to hit a couple of important beats, I guess you could say. Kenpachi's a tall, muscular guy, and he looks extremely intimidating. And, that's not exactly a wrong assessment or judgment of him. Usually you shouldn't judge people by how they look, but in Kenpachi's case, he is about as intimidating as he looks. He has green eyes and a bit of a weird haircut. He's got a little starfish thing going on for most of the series until the 1000-Year Blood War rolls around, in which case he gets himself a new cut. Actually, I think he changes his haircut in the Lost Agent arc, the Fullbringer arc. I do believe it's slightly changed in that one. He has a scar on his face that I'll be talking about in the 1000-Year Blood War version, but, I can at least say that it's more important than just a facial feature to make him look more badass. There is actual story behind where that scar comes from. So as far as what he wears, he wears the traditional captain outfit. He's got the captain of Squad 11, Heiori. He has some bandages, around his body. He has it on his midsection. He's got a sleeveless Captain's Heiori, so he can flex those guns. Now, of course, something special about the Captain of Squad 11's Heiori is that it's passed down from Kenpachi to Kenpachi, so, of course, his Heiori looks a little, worse for wear, I guess you could say. Oh, and as far as his hair, an interesting little factoid. He actually stiffens the little starfish strands during his baths. He gets in there and he kind of sculpts and molds his hair to look how it does. And those little bells he puts in his hair, as well as the eye patch he wears, they're actually there to limit his power. They serve as power limiters. So long as he has those bells in his hair, and so long as he wears that eye patch, the amount of power he has access to, as far as his full scope of power, the amount he actually has access to is significantly limited. This is so that he can actually get enjoyment out of the fight. Well, this person's weak, so I need the bells and the eye patch. Oh, this person's kind of strong, so I'll take off the bells, or I'll take off the eye patch for now. Or, oh yeah, this person can really get my gears grinding. So I'll take off the bells and the eye patch, go no holds barred, I'm all out. That's it for, like, his general appearance, hitting all the main beats. Now, as far as his personality, he's definitely a strange person, I guess. But he's a fun and exciting character for sure. He's a violent guy, but he doesn't really let his violent tendencies get in the way of doing the right thing, I guess you could say. Maybe he's a little abrasive, and maybe he's a little, I don't know, he's a bit intense. But, when you look at his actions, you can see that he's never done anything wrong or evil, by conventional means. He's killing bad guys. He's not killing good guys. I think that's about as good as we can get with old Kenpachi. He loves his fights, and he loves his battle, and he'll even actually, bring himself to the edge of death just to get a good fight. But, he's not a bad person. And even then, he always, or not always, but more often than not, when somebody's extremely injured and there's a choice, he'll give them the choice to back down. He'll stop fighting them. He'll cite something like, oh, I don't want to fight a weakling, or I don't want to fight somebody who's injured, or, now the fight isn't fun. But, all's fair, at its basest, he's giving an injured opponent the chance to surrender and not fight anymore. I think that's pretty decent of him. Also, something of note, well, you'd think, oh, somebody like a Blood Knight, a really bloodlusted type of fighter, he wouldn't really hold anything but the fight in really high regard. Well, he actually seems to have quite a reverence for the title of Kenpachi. There's an instance in the Thousand Year Blood War where this actually comes up, where somebody insults the title of Kenpachi, kind of, and, Kenpachi Zaraki starts taking the fight seriously. And we'll talk about that more then, but for now, know that that's a bit of a point of contention for him. Kenpachi's hairstyle is actually kind of a funny bit as well. He basically does this during his bath, like I mentioned earlier, but he basically has a habit of taking a bath every day before going to sleep. It's, part of his, ritual for strong perspiration, and, perspiration is the power of youth! No, that's dipping into guys' territory, but during these baths, he does soap in his hair to make it stiff, and he, molds and sculpts it. And, he just does that because, that's how he wants his hair to look. That's the style. There's actually a funny little anecdote where he tries to treat the hair of the lieutenant of Squad 1, Chojuro Sasakibe, and he couldn't do it. His hair was too silky, wasn't coarse enough, and Kenpachi doesn't like him because he wasn't able to fashion his hair. Just because of that, he doesn't like Chojuro. And as far as limiting himself with those bells, he does take that extremely seriously. Hell, the bell, like, directly above his head that points straight upwards, that takes several hours to get on there properly. Because the tip of his hair, of course, if you have his arms, it's, you're reaching up to your head, plus, the starfish point you've made. It's actually out of his reach, so it's very difficult to put on. But Kenpachi, being as proud as he is, doesn't ever ask anybody for help in styling his hair. Also, a kind of strong note for Kenpachi's character, something that, you wouldn't expect from a bloodlusted berserker type like Kenpachi. He actually has a big deal about respect. He respects people like Ichigo, who are able to give him a good fight, who are able to stand toe-to-toe with him and not only survive, but give him a good time. Respect is a big thing for him. Basically, just because he respected Ichigo in the Soul Society arc, I believe, just because he respected Ichigo and Ichigo was able to go toe-to-toe with him, he, in essence, swapped sides. He was fighting people. I mean, granted, it was because he wanted another chance to fight Ichigo, but he was literally fighting and willing to kill people on the Soul Society's team just because he wanted to find and fight Ichigo again. He was working with Chad and Orihime and Uryu and everyone else. He was working with them to find Ichigo just so he could have another fight. And he was going against the whole Soul Society. It's because of how much he respected Ichigo and how much he wanted that fight. There's another big deal with respect, and it kind of relates back to the Kenpachi title. Again, that's something we'll have to discuss in a later video, in the Thousand Year Blood War video, but for now, I will say that that is probably the main instance of how respect is important to Kenpachi, and it's probably one of the most important character points for him, and it's a big reason why he's such a stickler about his title. As for Kenpachi's role in the story, at the beginning, he seems to be just like a crazy battle-hungry captain. He's, aggravating people and taunting Byakuya about Rukia's death, or her execution in any case. And, he's basically just going around being a general butt. But of course, when he comes across Ichigo, and they fight, and, he just by a hair loses to Ichigo, such a good fight, it really got Kenpachi's, engines going. He really was rearing for another fight. That's when he becomes a bit more complex, a little bit more interesting. See, it's at this point that Kenpachi decides to swap teams. And he goes to war with his own team, essentially. He fights Jin Komomura, one of the captains, and he fights another captain, Kaname Tosen, and he's basically going to war with his own team just to get another fight with Ichigo. It's very interesting, and he goes about, trying to find Ichigo and looking for him, and, helping his team, in essence, and after that, we don't really see him in an important light too often. Next time we see him appear is during the Arrancar arc. Kenpachi is one of the captains dispatched to Hueco Mundo to help Ichigo and assist him in the rescuing of Orihime Inoue. This leads to probably one of Kenpachi's most badass fights in the entire series, or at least for the entire anime, and that would be Kenpachi Zaraki versus Notora Gilgas. It's a super intense fight, really along the same vein as Ichigo versus Kenpachi. They're clashing, they're, doing decently against each other. There's a lot of back and forth, like, oh, I am the 5th Espada, my skin is so tough, you can't cut me, and Kenpachi's like, I can cut anything, and then Noitoro's like, he can cut me, well, now I'm going to use my Resurrection, and now I have a billion arms, and I'm about to beat your ass, and then Kenpachi's like, well, actually, now I'm gonna start trying, I'm going to use my sword with 2 hands, and Noitoro's like, no! It's really... it's truly, in essence, it's a very shonen fight. It's a lot of back and forth. It's 2 bloodlusted freaks of nature clashing in an all-out brawl. It's a very exciting fight. It's very enjoyable. If you haven't seen Bleach, I highly recommend watching this fight. I wouldn't say it's the essence of the series, but it is one of the most exciting battles in the series. But in a complete inverse of Kenpachi versus Ichigo, where Kenpachi just narrowly loses by like a single hair's width, in the opposite vein, he wins this one just barely. And that's actually commented on in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, and there's actually an interesting reason why he barely lost to Ichigo, but barely won against Noitora. After this, Kenpachi and Byakuya would go on to team up against Yami, Espada number 0, while everyone else goes to the fake Karakura to confront the number 3, number 2, and number 1 Espada, Haribel Tyr, Baragon, and Coyote Stark, as well as the team of Renegade Shinigami, Gin Ichimaru, Tosen Kaname, and the man, the myth, the legend himself, Sosuke Aizen. After this confrontation, we wouldn't see Kenpachi Zaraki again until after the time skip of several months, when Ichigo is going up against Kujo Ginjo in the series finale, or the anime series finale, until several years later, like almost 20 years later. We see Kenpachi arrives to, well, this is a bit of an awkward situation, but In essence, if you care about spoilers for the Can't Fear Your Own World light novel that comes after the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, then you might want to skip ahead a bit. But, in essence, while it seems at first that Kenpachi is there to provide aid for Ichigo and backup, Kenpachi and all the other lieutenants and captains that were deployed were actually there to dispatch and kill Ichigo if he were to turn against the Soul Society, having learned that they were monitoring him through his substitute Soul Reaper pass, that they were monitoring him and at any point willing to backstab and kill him if he were to go against them. But since Ichigo is a main protagonist and a good boy, they were there to help. They were there to help their friend because he was still on their side. So Kenpachi would go on to 1v1 Giriko and one-shot him because, from all this time, basically the people in the Soul Society, after the downfall of Aizen, they have been in the Soul Society training to fight somebody on Aizen's level. So all these Fullbringers are basically nothing to them. Small potatoes. That's pretty much the main beats of Kenpachi throughout the series. He really gets I mean, he's one of the strongest captains in the series for the anime. And he gets a big glow up during the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. He gets his own mini arc in the arc itself, and he gets way stronger, and it's crazy because now the gap between him and the rest of the captains is just massively large. Now, there are some captains who have the power to bridge the gap, but Kenpachi is definitely a different beast. The man is built different. And as part of a good, character development of Kenpachi in this final arc, we do get a lot of big sad moments. So, rip Kenpachi's, happy-go-lucky demeanor with, no sadness to his backstory. He's just fight, kill, murder, destroy. Yeah, Kenpachi really gets fleshed out as a character during this last arc, and it's a very fun little dive into Kenpachi's character, and he has a lot of good fights, he has a lot of good interactions in the 1,000-Year Blood War, and I can't wait to kind of do a little overview of him, if you will. But yeah, now that we've kind of gone over his history, we can get into his powers and abilities. So in essence, Kenpachi is, like most captains, a swordsman master. He's a savant at fighting the sword. He has no formal training, but because of his power and his speed and everything like that, he is, immaculate in sword fighting. He is among the most, if not the most, proficient swordsman in all of the Sword Society, and this probably also comes to the fact that while he never received any formal training, he does fight a lot. So it's a bit of an learning through experience kind of deal. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, fighting with two hands on the sword, he was forced by Yamamoto to learn Kendo because, he had no formal sword training because of the way he became captain. He didn't go through the academy, he became the Kenpachi. So Yamamoto was like, alright, I'm gonna teach you Kendo so that you at least have some semblance of how to fight with an actual sword. And then he cut that shit short because Yamamoto realized the absolute monster of a threat that Kenpachi would be just by using two hands on his sword, let alone learning anything else beyond this. So his Kendo training with Yamamoto literally only lasted 1 day because he thought Kenpachi would become too powerful. But of course, Kenpachi doesn't really use two hands too often because he doesn't really like the whole skill and technique spiel that most people use. So the only Kendo technique he actually learned was the Ryodan, or bisection. Basically, he grabs his sword with two hands and slices right down the middle, and it usually allows for him to, as the name would suggest, bisect his opponent. Furthermore, because of his massive spiritual pressure, he also creates a giant blast of his spiritual pressure when he does so. He's also impressive in hand-to-hand combat. He likes swords more, but, of course, with his physical power, he's not bad with his hands either. He was actually even able to take out members of the Onmitsu Kido Corps, which is basically an entire corps of hand-to-hand combatants, despite the fact that he was tired at the time, if I remember correctly. And don't get it twisted. He may be physically strong, but his spiritual pressure is nothing to laugh at. This guy is insane. Even with seals that reduce his spiritual pressure, he was still able to take on two captains, Sajin and Kaname, while sealed while they had their Bankais, and he wasn't even using his Shikai. He is an absolute monster. If you look to somebody with possibly the highest spiritual pressure in the entire series, barring, you know, Soul King candidates and Aizen, I think it's him. I think it's Kenpachi. The worst thing about Kenpachi as far as spiritual pressure goes is that he can't control it. He's a bit of a I'll just hit something really hard now, worry about the specifics later kind of guy. So despite the fact that he has all this massive, crazy spiritual pressure, he can't even control it to the point that he can consciously restrict and access his massive pool of spiritual pressure. You know, like, he might be so strong and so powerful against one person and then really, really weak against another. So that does suck for the character, but we never really see that inhibit him, I suppose you could say. We never see that inhibit him in the series. We don't get it twisted, we do see its effect in the series, and it's explained in the Thousand Year Blood War how this affects him, but it never makes Kenpachi lose a fight that he needed to win. Yeah, a couple other things interesting to note about just his natural body. His skin and his spiritual pressure are incredibly dense and powerful, so it's, you know, actually kind of hard to damage Kenpachi. And also with his, you know, sheer strength and spiritual pressure, he's actually able to make, you know, shockwaves when he swings his blade, or even in some instances, you know, blasts of energy. You know, for example, the Ryodan, the bifurcation. And there are a few other instances where he launches energy at someone. You know, it's a bit interesting, but, you know, they're a bit minor things to note that are, you know, I would say they're important. Another thing that makes Kenpachi such a threat against people is his ability to understand things. And through this level of, you know, being able to come to terms with an opponent's abilities and, you know, strategize around it, while he may not be smart, this is developed, you know, as a sort of battle sense. It's like, okay, if I, like, this is what I have to do to get around this ability. This is what I have to do to hurt this person. This is, you know, we see this in his fight against Kaname. That is probably one of the greatest examples of him being battle savvy without inherently being intelligent. And he even himself admits that he's only an average thinker, but, you know, he's constantly praised for his sense for battle. He's a decent strategist, but he's just really good on things like instinct and, you know, developing plans to deal with powers and, you know, coming to terms with their abilities and figuring out how they work and how to counter them. You know, I keep saying it, but it really is true. The man is a savant. Now, one bad thing about Kenpachi is that he doesn't know Kido or Shunpo, so he can't flash step, and he can't, you know, use the Soul Reaper spells that they usually use. But, of course, he makes up for it in his massive amounts of strength. You know, he may have never gone through the Soul Reaper Academy to learn all these, you know, sword techniques, to learn Kido, to learn Shunpo, anything like that, but, I mean, the dude's a beast. He could take on pretty much anyone just with raw strength alone. I don't really think it's that much of an issue. The man's also super fast, even without Shunpo, so I don't know how much of an issue it is for him. And even if somebody is way faster than him, as we also mentioned before, his spiritual pressure gives him a lot of damage resistance, and he has insane endurance. He can just take a hit straight to the face and keep going, you know. There are some wounds he's received that would completely debilitate other people, and he just pushes through. There are times where he's had to, you know, injure himself or take life-ending injuries, and he just keeps going without a beating of an eyelash. It's truly remarkable. And not only that, but, like, you have to get past his spiritual pressure. You have to actually put him down because he just keeps chugging on. But that's even to say if you can damage him in the first place. He is insanely durable to add on to his spiritual pressure damage resistance and his insane endurance. You know, he himself is actually extremely tough. There are a lot of people who have a hard time actually making any, you know, meaningful damage on him. It's actually really impressive. It's basically like his entire body is just built to fight. He is a fighting machine. Finally, of course, we'll be going over his Shikai and Bankai, in the Thousand Year Blood War video where that will actually, come into play. This is the arc where he gets his Shikai and his Bankai. This is the arc where he gets his own character arc, basically revolving around his title as Kenpachi, his past, and of course his Shikai and his Bankai. So we'll get to that when we get to that video, but for now, this has been Kenpachi Zaraki. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I hit all the main points that you guys were wondering about, Kenpachi, and I hope I did the man justice. He really is a fun character, and I think there are a lot of people that, while they may not like his personality, or they may think he's a bit of an obstacle more than he is a help, I do believe in my heart of hearts that he is a very fun character, and I enjoy a lot of different characters like him, but he's probably one of my favorite ones that, has his personality. He's always the OG when you think of, like, berserker, crazy kind of people. It's always Kenpachi Zaraki, man. So make sure you guys leave a like, hit that notification bell. Yo, what up? Oh my god. Comment something down below, like maybe who you want to see next, what kind of content do you guys want to see, whatever. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of my stuff. I'm just out here chilling, making videos. I hope people enjoy watching them, and I hope you enjoy watching them and you want to come back and watch more of my videos. But if you don't, that's okay too. I'm just going to keep on making videos because I enjoy doing it. So, with that said, I'll see you guys in the next video.
Untitled.